College football nerds coming at you with some Sunday afternoon content. Wanted to get this out because Josh is leaving me this week. So there won't be a lot of previews or anything like that, but I'm going to try to do some things special this week. One thing is Tuesday, I'm going to drop a video for y'all to watch. It's the best running back rooms of all time. We tried this summer, and it was wildly popular on Twitter, 1.4 million views on the question we asked. So y'all keep an eye out. Make sure that notification bell is rang and you are subscribed and liked to us so you can get that on Tuesday. But today, we're going to talk Alabama, Texas, and a little bit of college football landscape, what we saw on Saturday. One other reminder, collegefootballnerds.com. Check it out. Got a pick 'em going on right now. Top 25 is coming out in 2 weeks. You'll be able to vote top 25. The model is coming out after week 4. You will be able to check out the model and do your own simulations. And NFL starts today, which means you can check out NFLU, and it's got all of your team, your favorite college team's players in one click, all of their stats for the week in the season. Check it out, collegefootballnerds.com. All right, Josh, we just watched Alabama lose this game to Texas, and I think the high-level summary, we're going to get into the details because there's a lot of minutia there, but the high-level takeaway is Alabama doesn't have a quarterback and Texas does. People are going to say that's an oversimplification, and in some ways it is, but in some ways it's not. And Josh, here's where I want you to break it down because we like to talk about yards per attempt as a good measure of how well a quarterback did. And Jalen Milroe, if you look at his yards per attempt, it was 9.4 yards per attempt, 2 tutties, ran the ball as well, 255 yards. And if you just come into the box score, you'll be like, well, hey, that's pretty good. That doesn't showcase how much of a liability he was for Alabama in this game. And he did the thing that I said we needed to see after last week to see if Alabama's going to have an offense or not. And that's, can he run the offense consistently? Not just a couple of deep shots, not just some running. Can he do that? We got the answer tonight. Want you to talk about what you saw. Get us into Jalen Milroe in this Alabama offense. Obviously, we're going to have Texas some of their love too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's one point we tweeted during the game that Jalen Milroe actually had a yard per attempt better average than Quinn Ewers did, and it didn't feel like it. And even to end the game, he was 9.4 yards per attempt to 9.2 from Ewers. You see the difference a little bit in things like the quarterback rating, completion percentage, 63 to 52%. But the overriding point there was that Ewers, even though he had a lower yard per attempt average, his effectiveness for the offense was better than Milroe. There's so much that goes into playing quarterback just in terms of keeping drives alive, throwing the ball to get completions, to keep the chains moving. So much of what Texas did kept them on schedule consistently. So much of what Alabama did not. Alabama, I think, frankly, I thought their play calling was really poor. They frequently would run on first down, and then, depending on what yardage they get, they'd either run again or they'd throw. It was just perfectly predictable. Texas figured that pretty quick. I think they threw on first down. Outside of the end of half situation or end of game situation, they probably threw on first down, I'm guessing maybe once the entire game, once or twice. So in that sort of vein, every time Milroe missed, it was often a third down they needed to complete to keep the chains moving. And even though his average was really high because he hit on a couple deep shots, the problem is, though, it was either deep shot or punt. And Ewers isn't hitting as many deep shots, but he hit way more passes that went for 20 or 30 yards that kept the chains moving. They were constantly moving to Alabama's side of the field. They were constantly running more plays. And I think that really lent itself to the result of that game, right? Because Alabama went into the fourth quarter with the lead, believe it or not. And it was only a 16-13 game. And then Texas turns around and they score 21 points in the fourth quarter. That was because Alabama's defense, I think, just got really tired. And they got tired because Texas did a much better job of sustaining drives because Alabama made critical mistakes at the wrong time. Those 2 interceptions, the first one wasn't so bad. There was a corner that was in man coverage. You rolled off to another guy. That bites a lot of quarterbacks. The second interception was awful. Stared a guy down. Corner was actually in phase the whole time, staring at the quarterback, and then let the safety run under it. I don't know, it doesn't get picked even if the safety's not there. So all that stuff really added up that, even if you just, you look at yards per attempt and maybe Milroe had a good day. No, you watch the game itself and there's absolutely no doubt that Ewers outplayed Milroe. However, I will throw this back to you. I don't actually know that I really think the quarterback play was even the deciding factor of the game personally. I thought it was really the defensive line play, offensive line battle, because Texas really won that battle on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. And the Texas pass rush was pretty much ever present, whereas Alabama's pass rush the second half just totally disappeared.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit during the game. I was surprised to see Alabama dropping 8 some during the game when they weren't getting home with 4. That was a little weird to me, and it kind of bit them in the butt a couple of times. Texas was getting home more with 3 and 4, but it also seemed like Milroe didn't have the pocket awareness to handle it when it happened, and we saw Ewers a couple times climb the pocket and make big plays. I think that line play was a problem, but I also think that Alabama's offense in general looked very kind of inconsistent. And to me, looking again at the numbers, we've talked about this for a couple of years now with Alabama, and I think more of it is now with the quarterback situation than the OC situation. You cannot have a feast or famine offense and win at a high level. You just can't. And Alabama had 5 possessions in the first half. They scratched together 2 field goals. One of them was a 52-yarder that they got some yards against Prevent and on their last drive. Josh, when we talk about what Alabama's standard is, and that's national championships, is it somewhat concerning given the fact that even if Milroe struggles, he's going to win a bunch of games at Alabama. And if you're an Alabama fan, that might be a little bit worrisome because you know that he's going to win maybe just enough to stay on the field, even though it's pretty clear, even though they might have OL issues, it's pretty clear that I don't think Milroe is going to win them a championship.
That's the way it feels. Now, I don't know. You could see at times in that game where he took some steps forward. He made some throws down the middle of the field that were actually quite impressive. In terms of being able to drive the ball. But there were also a lot of plays when he improvised where either one, he didn't do anything. Like he would just sort of jog to the sideline and run out of bounds or throw it away, which was really strange. Or he tried to flip it over the line of scrimmage. He looked like a freshman on those plays. It was really, really weird. So I don't know. And that, to your point, it's kind of just good enough to not get the hook. And I think a lot of people, we put out a tweet to say, is it him being bad or the Texas defense being good? And it seemed like everyone was just kind of torn and saying a bit of both. And that's probably why he's not going to get the hook. The thing that it reminds me of, honestly, Daniel, is this J.T. Barrett at Ohio State in a way. And now it was really the exact opposite player in a lot of other ways. But he was a guy that you never really felt like was probably well positioned to win a title at Ohio State. Never really did, right? It was Cardale Jones that came in late and won a title when he got hurt. I don't know that Ohio State wins the title if Cardale Jones doesn't come in, because they had some great receivers that year, and you had guys like Michael Thomas that was, I think, led them in receptions in one of those playoff games, who hadn't really had a big impact until the quarterback change. Obviously, he's turned out to be a pretty good receiver. So that was kind of my gist to it. But when you talk standard, I think you also have to give a lot of credit for Texas, because Texas is recruiting at a top 5 standard. And the big story of the game in a lot of ways is that Texas won the battle in terms of physicality. They didn't run the ball as much as Alabama did, but they did, I think, mainly because they didn't need to. It felt like when they wanted to, they probably got more push. They were as or more physical downfield. And that was reflective of the fact that they've got the talent level to play with anybody. And I think, I do feel like even in this, win or loss, it's always a little subjective, but this felt like a bigger game than anything else I'd really seen to this point. These felt like 2 heavyweights. Albeit in week 2, they weren't playing well. That's not my point. But just in terms of size, speed, athleticism, every bit as much as what we saw in the LSU-FSU game. Frankly, I think maybe more in a lot of ways. And that was interesting. But it's also interesting because now Texas is probably in the driver's seat for one of those playoff spots. Well, at the same time, as our constant gripe of playoff expansion, Alabama's absolutely not out of their own driver's seat. This game is an inconvenience if they lose another game. I don't even know if it matters if they lose another game in the regular season, though. If they win their division and go to the SEC title and beat Georgia, they could easily be a 2-loss team in the playoffs. So it's kind of interesting how all this plays out and how much it matters and how much it doesn't matter. But to your point, it's interesting to project it from a quality perspective for the playoff discussion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to me that's got to be encouraging if you're a Texas fan is, I think that, and I do want you to get into this a little bit later, because it's going to segue into the rest of college football. But I do think this game was a lot closer than maybe the final score looked, especially like you said, Bama was leading in the fourth quarter. But I slightly disagree with you there. Texas wasn't running the ball well. They got like 40 of their 105 yards on the last drive when Alabama's defense was just gassed from being on the field all night. Even with those yards, they had 2.8 yards per carry. The thing that's encouraging if you're a Texas fan is, what did you say this summer, all summer? Like, you're losing two really top-notch running backs, and there's some concern because those running backs were the only reason you got 8 wins last year, right? So to see Quinn Ewers, this set of wide receivers plus scheme, Sark's big thing that he brings to the table is he schemes guys open, and he's finally comfortable with Ewers and the rest of this offensive staff or offensive personnel that it's starting to show. It's starting to really materialize. And Quinn put the team on his back in this game. He almost threw it 40 times. I mean, that's usually not a great sign against an Alabama defense. And the thing is, and I think it took Alabama a little while to adjust to realize that Sark was like, okay, you're going to stop the run. And the Alabama, to their credit, was stopping the run with their base personnel, not having to dedicate extra guys, kept 2 safeties back. They said, you're going to stop the run? Okay, we're going to find creative ways to beat you through the air. And he had enough trust in his guy to do it, and they went out and did it. I also thought that the wide receiver skill players on both sides of the ball, there was a pretty big gap. To me, just to my eye, it felt like Texas had a little bit more quality there than we've seen from Alabama in a few years.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I got to eat a little crow there because when we've had discussions with people, they've pushed Adonai Mitchell as a big factor, and I noted, big factor was he averaged 2. He made big plays in playoff games, but he'd only actually averaged 2, I think, under 2 receptions a game in those games. It just happened to be big plays when he got hit. And he was really the star of the show tonight. It really wasn't Xavier Worthy. It was Adonai Mitchell that was burning guys deep. The tough thing there a little bit to evaluate is that this is also a new Alabama secondary, and I don't know 100% if Alabama's defense has issues more than Texas's wide receivers. They were definitely being good. It definitely was Texas being really, really open, but you can never really evaluate that until you see a couple other games, and you got to look at it in a relational standpoint. It also doesn't help the fact that all 3 starting safeties apparently for Alabama were unwell. Apparently the Malachi Moore and then Key were injured up on the injury report up to the day of, and then Caleb Downs, they said he was blowing chunks on the sideline, so I don't know what that was about. So yeah, I don't know. It made it a little bit harder to evaluate, but I will say in terms of who won the battle, I don't think there's any doubt Texas won the battle more often than Alabama did. And to your point, they weren't moving the ball, running it. I just was really saying I think they were doing a decent enough job of staying on schedule with it. But I guess it did pick up later. Yeah, and I think that leads to another point too, which is, again, it is a weird game because I felt like even when Alabama took the lead, they were losing. It felt like they were getting outplayed, and they did take the lead, though. I mean, it was 16-13 going into the quarter. It's kind of weird to say that Texas hit 21 points. I really feel like, and I'm, trying to find the play right now on the fly, and I'm probably going to fail to do it. No, I did. It was the start of the fourth quarter, right, when Jalen Milroe throws in it that really bad interception that turned that game around. It was 20-16 Texas. They just scored. And I feel like that play completely shifted it and blew it open. Texas immediately drove down, scored a touchdown. It became 27-16. And now all of a sudden, Alabama had to be a pass-first offense. Took them out of their game plan, and it just blew up. Alabama was not built, prepared, or schemed to throw the ball as much as they did in the fourth quarter. And defensively, suddenly you're in desperation stop mode, and it just didn't work. And that was... I think this is the transition you want me to get into, but I'll let you divert me if you disagree. That was kind of the...
Yeah,
go ahead.
I know where you're going, and it relates to a couple of other games. And before we can get into that, I want to really talk about this, I guess, the play calling approach for Alabama, because Jalen Milroe is clearly not super comfortable being a pocket passer. Were you surprised that they didn't run him more tonight in dedicated runs? Because it's like, I felt like every time they did a dedicated run for him, it was 10, 15 yards.
I was very surprised at the way they used him. My assumption, given how athletic he is that they were going to have a lot of designed rollouts and some run pass options where he's rolling out and he's going to make a single read and either go or no go. And I think they maybe called 2 design runs, maybe 1 in the entire night. And frankly, that was kind of shocking to me because they weren't throwing it well for most of the night. I don't know. It's odd. They did seem to ask him to be a pocket passer. He's not, at this point, a very good pocket passer. He bails in the pocket whether it's clean or not. And if that's going to be the case, then you need to just design the rollout into the play because he's going to bail. So it was odd. There was I don't think there's any doubt Texas outcoached Alabama in that game. I mean, Sarkisian did a really good job of taking what they were doing well early in the game in the first half, which is they were throwing the ball down the field pretty well, but the short to intermediate game, they hurt Alabama a lot with screens early, but then they kind of backed off on that because it wasn't consistent enough to move the ball, and they started getting more and more vertical, and they realized that they had the quarterback in rhythm, and they leaned in it. Whereas Alabama, I felt like, never really adjusted. They stayed with what they were doing, kept running the ball on first down, and kept not getting a whole lot of yardage, kept trying to throw out of the pocket, and it not worked. And it happens a lot when you get really late in the game, quarterbacks make bigger plays because they're just trying to be decisive. And when they got in that position, again, start of the fourth quarter, it all kind of fell apart because he throws an interception and it felt like they went totally boom or bust and the game completely got away.
I think what's interesting to see is where Alabama goes from here, because what you and I feel like we're in agreement here that Milroe is a good enough athlete, and Alabama has good enough athletes, especially in what might be a down year for the SEC, for Alabama to have a nice 10-win season. If they're going to win a national championship, it's not going to happen, in my opinion, with Milroe, which means you might not win a national championship with either of the 2 guys you got behind him, but you're definitely not with Milroe. And we saw in 2015, they started the season with, I think it was Cooper Bateman or somebody, and he got pulled in the middle of the game against Ole Miss. They ended up losing that game, but they found a quarterback in that game. I was borderline shocked, and I think Alabama fans should legitimately be concerned. People are saying Saban lost his fastball. Saban put up with a lot more tonight than he's ever, because one of his big things is, like, I'll put up with a little bit of, ineffectiveness from a quarterback if he's protecting the ball. Milroe's not protecting the ball, and he should have thrown an interception on the touchdown that got called back. I'm kind of shocked because this is not like Alabama's in the past. If you think about Alabama, maybe a little bit 2014 Blake Sims, but they've had a competent, good quarterback almost every year of Nick Saban's tenure, at least not a liability at quarterback. And I feel like what we saw tonight was Anthony Richardson kind of QB, and he ain't never going to win a national championship anywhere. What do you think? Am I being too harsh in saying that the fact that Saban didn't try anybody else tonight might signal, I don't want to say he's gone soft, but that his approach to the game is a little bit softer?
Maybe. You don't know the situation in terms of who they've prepped, how good the backups are. Because often the discussion is how bad is the backup, right? We can probably talk about it in a bit. But Jeff Sims at Nebraska, why the heck did they keep that guy in? Because he was playing horribly. And the answer was the backup quarterback wasn't better. That's often the answer to it. You can't just assume that Alabama has another guy that actually answers that question more. And it may be that we know that Milroe isn't going to win a national championship. But Saban maybe knows that Milroe will get him to the SEC championship, and he knows nobody else will. So you don't know. And I think you also got to give a lot of credit, again, to Texas. I mean, Texas with Sorrell and Burke got a tremendous amount of pressure. That freshman left tackle from Alabama and that Ballyhoot offensive line got whipped most of the night. And that was Texas being Texas. And that's not on the quarterback. There were long sections there where Texas was winning, not really because of anything they were doing wrong at quarterback, but because they were getting pressure and bringing him down, and they were winning offensively in the fourth quarter. If Alabama's defense holds strong and doesn't give up points, they win that game. Even with the interception, that maybe you hold them to a field goal and it's a tie game. So there are a lot more pieces buckling there than the quarterback, and I'm sure from Saban's mind, he's not going to want to pin that on quarterback play. But I think they need to evaluate it. So I don't know. I think there's some right and wrong there. Um, but the final point I do want to end on is the positive aspect for Texas, because you talk about the national title aspirations of Alabama and taking a hit, which they have, but they're just sort of on the back burner. I don't know that with their schedule in the SEC, I don't know that anybody's going to begrudge them a loss, because they're still going to have to go through Georgia anyway. But Texas at this point just looks really good. Offensively, they were complete. They have good running backs. They have a good running game, even though it got stymied. I didn't feel like it was bad. Found good quarterback play. They have a solid receiving core, really spread the ball all around the field. Little things here and there. They had some misses where they had drops, things that we've shown up, but it wasn't critical. Dynamic tight end in Sanders. On the defensive line, Collins, Collins, Burke, all those guys were extremely effective. I thought the secondary was about 50-50 on how locked down they were, but there were a lot of plays where I kind of wondered what in the world Jalen Milroe was doing. And when they started the second half and showed the sky cam, man, that secondary had everybody locked down. I think you do also have to take the other aspect of it, which is that Texas may be one of the best teams in the country. They are one of the top 5 rosters in the country, maybe one of the top 3 rosters in the country in terms of talent. We've all slept on them, perhaps justifiably, because they were up and down last year. This was a team that lost a lot of games. Ewers has not been consistent, and I will say, didn't play this well in the first game of the season, may not play this well in the future, which means they may drop other games looking nothing like they did tonight. But the flip side to all of this, and I'm sure this goes into Saban's mind, is he knows he's playing a good team, and a lot of what's going on had to do with all the things Texas was doing right. And plugging in a new quarterback into that situation isn't going to make them suddenly be able to get snaps off the ground or keep the left tackle from getting beat. It's certainly not going to keep their safeties from getting torched deep by Adonai Mitchell. I kind of get where Saban was coming from, which is just that Texas is a really freaking good football team.
Yeah, I mean, they deserve a ton of credit. This is not a game that, it's a game that they felt like they were either in or ahead throughout the whole thing. It wasn't a game to me that was really in doubt that much. Even when, like you said, when they were trailing, it didn't feel like they were going to lose.